city, you enter first of all St. Peter's Square. It's a large piazza, a large square where people can gather. And that square is embraced by colonnades, just columns that go all the way around. Somebody said it's like open arms gathering God's people in. One of the things that you'll notice if you look up, because everything's so high, is 140 statues that go all along the colonnades of various saints throughout the history of the church. They are there, gathered in the square with the people. And then on top of the basilica, the church itself, are statues of Jesus, of course, the center, and the 12 apostles. They appear larger than life, of course. They're looking down on us as we move into this immense church building. Yet even though they may appear to be larger than life, all of those saints, of course Mary and Jesus accepted, were sinners. These were common men and women in history who had their struggles and their weaknesses. Take the Apostle James, of course, his feast is today. There are two James listed among the apostles, and we distinguish them from the other by saying James the Greater and James the Lesser. James the Greater, whose feast is today, was the brother of John, and they were both, of course, sons of Zebedee. They were fishermen when Jesus called them. They dropped their nets and they followed him. James became a prominent leader in the early Christian community in Jerusalem, and we believe he was probably the first martyr, the first apostle who was killed. That's something that's recorded in the Acts of the Apostles. Along with his brother John and Peter, James was chosen by Jesus to witness certain things in his ministry. He was with Peter and John on the mountain when Jesus was transfigured in their presence. He and his brother John and St. Peter were the ones invited into the home of Jairus when Jesus raised his dead daughter back to life. He and John and St. Peter were closest to Jesus. The three of them formed really this kind of inner circle. But we should be careful not to assume that because of that they were better than the other 12. In fact, James had his own struggles. He was ambitious, and maybe we would say a bit selfish after hearing today's gospel. He and his brother wanted to sit next to Jesus in this kingdom that Jesus spoke about. That request made the other apostles pretty upset at them, and Jesus had to kind of admonish them and teach them that it's not about glory that you're seeking, it's about being of service to one another after the example of Jesus. We could also presume that James had a temper of sorts. When Jesus and the apostles were wanting to go through Samaritan territory one day, the Samaritans would not allow them to pass through. And what did James and his brother John say? Let's call lightning down on them to kill them. So James and John were admonished by Jesus again. And the two were known as the sons of thunder, which gives you some hint as to how they were viewed by the others. So the first reading tells us we are earthen vessels. That means we're fragile and we can easily be broken. But God chooses us in our fragility, in our weakness, so that his glory may be revealed. On our own, we can do very little, but with God's grace operating within us, we can do amazing things for the kingdom. James and the other apostles probably learned this truth the hard way, right? They eventually allowed themselves to be shaped by the master, like the clay in the hands of the potter. And in the end, they all became leaders of a church and of a faith that is spread throughout the world. Each of them in their own way became a personal witness to Christ by the way they died, by the way they lived their apostolic lives. So as we celebrate the life and ministry of St. James today, we should remember we're just like him, sinful and weak. Yet we have been called also to be witnesses to Christ Jesus, something that can only be accomplished by God's willingness.